I'll start with Troy's. If you're okay with that, I'll just take your thing and
you can take it.
Yeah.
There yours. Thank you. Guess I could put my work badge up now. I feel like Britney Spears.
Yeah. Get all the help you need.
Yes, sir.
John asked me to step by here. Sure. Pardon me. Working just a second ago. I got number 2. I'm going to do this one. Why is it not working? See, Troy's volume's going down here. Well, you got me turned down on your computer. Trying to talk. No, I've got it turned down. I just told Ed to turn it up, but he didn't turn it up. I'll go turn it.
All right. As soon as you get up there. No, I'm gonna give this one right back to Troy.
All right, John's on his way. Check. 1, 2.
Sibilance.
Check. There we go. All right, folks. I'd like to welcome you all to Behind the Curtain. As masonry teaches us, before embarking on any great or important undertaking, we should first invoke the aid and blessing of Almighty God. To those ends, I would ask everyone to stand and Brother Al Sims to open us with prayer, please.
Our dear most gracious Heavenly Father, Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity to come here as brothers in masonry and just friends. Thank you, Lord, for fellowship. Lord, open our minds, open our hearts to be able to learn more about our fraternity. Lord, be with us, guide us, direct us. In His name. Amen.
Amen.
Knights of St. Andrew, please post the colors.
Post the colors. Present arms. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, form. Out.
Thank you, Sir Knights. Would you all be seated, please? Again, I would like to welcome everybody. It's nice to have such a crowd here. And we've got a very interesting and entertaining program. But before we do that, our personal representative, I'll call on him. He's got some introductions, a little bit of information to go over, and then we'll get into the program. So, Alan?
Thank you, Venerable. Brothers and ladies, I would like to introduce a special visitor that we have with us tonight. Illustrious Alberto Thompson, 33rd degree of the Valley of Panama. Some patients at the Shrine Hospital and has been visiting around at several Masonic groups while he's in Japan. Also tonight, we have a presentation to our Grand Treasurer, Brother Charles Smith. There you are. I was looking for it. Charles, if you'll come on down. Charles has completed the Master Craftsman, what used to be Master Craftsman 3, the Master Craftsman Symbolic Law. And Charles, we want to congratulate you on your participation in the program and your certificate. I think you have your certificate.
Close your mouth this time, Alex. Close your mouth.
That's right. Also, in signifying this, and we're very proud of you. Congratulations for putting you. Brother, I would encourage you, the symbolic Master Craftsman 3 was for the symbolic lodge, and I would encourage you to take a look at that at the correspondence course, multiple choice questions, and I would encourage you to participate in that. Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you. All right, we're about to get into the program that's been a few months in the making. I would encourage those of you who are not currently ScottishRite Masons to pay particular attention, as a lot of this information is things that we go into far more depth in within the degrees. The degrees of ScottishRite Masonry are not only beautiful, but they're very, very meaningful and teach a lot of valuable lessons. So we do have a reunion that's coming up August 20th and 21st. If you are not currently a ScottishRite Mason, put it on your calendar to view these degrees. If you are a ScottishRite Mason, please make sure to come and enjoy, help in the degrees, see them again, refresh your memory on what the lessons taught. So with that being said, our presenter for tonight is Brother Troy Jones, 32nd degree, and as you can see also a Knight of St. Andrew. Although Troy has not been a ScottishRite Mason for an extensive amount of time, he is probably by far the biggest advocate I have seen of Masonic history in general, and specifically ScottishRite history. Symbolism, lessons, and things of that nature. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to him because he'll sound a lot better and more educated than I am. So would you help me welcome Troy Jones, please?
I'm going to sit down.
Thank you, Venerable. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, brethren, welcome. It's going to be a good night. I'm going to take you through a couple of different things. We're going to talk about history. We're going to talk about biblical history, which may differ than what other people think. And we're going to talk about the degrees. However, if you're a brother in the audience, have no worries. I'm not going to actually allude to anything that you wouldn't understand or your wife wouldn't understand. When I was writing this, Brother West, I think we started in September of last year when he approached me. Because he knows it takes me, the sun doesn't rise in an instant at the Jones house. So the idea was, get this thing together, get it ready. We wanted to present the degrees to you in such a way that all of you would be able to experience part of it. So we focused on the obligatory degrees, or the ones that we call obligatory, which means those are required in order to become a Scottish Rite Mason. In different valleys, they're sometimes the only degrees that go through, that the candidates go through. Those degrees are enumerated, the fourth being the first degree, strange, because every Master Mason's already attended 3. So the fourth would be the first one that we represented. So the 4th degree, then we have the 14th degree, then the 18th degree, the 30th and the 32nd. Remember the numbers, there'll be a test. No, I can't keep the numbers straight either. But the stories I'm going to tell you tonight, I hope you remember. I'm going to start off with talking about the main backdrop. This is something that every Scottish Rite Mason in the Shreveport Valley has seen over and over and over again. But why we got those sphinxes on there? We know about double-headed eagle. We've talked about that before. You've probably even seen that on family crests, coins, different regalia that your husband or your spouse may have. But what about the sphinxes? Why are they present? What are they there for? Why are there 3 steps leading up to a throne with other symbols on there than the Christian cross? And I want to take you through these symbols, not necessarily esoterically, but symbolically. We're going to talk about the symbols in a real sense, the historical significance that they had. And a great example is that the 3 crosses, the 3 symbols for faith that you see in the main part of the curtain. The Star of David, the cross with the rose in the center. We're going to get into that one, I can guarantee it. And then the other cross. Does anybody know what the cross on the far right-hand side is called? I heard it. The Teutonic cross, right? Does anybody know what the word Teutonic means? I had to look it up. It is German. Equidistant. So the idea is that the cross is equal. Well, why is it so different than the one in the middle? And why do we have 2? All these are questions I'm going to be posing to you tonight. I want you to think about these things. Hopefully I'm going to pose questions that you'll go home and look up. The sphinxes, from time that we've been recording things, have been represented in Egypt and in other places. Did you know that in Karnak, they actually have what they call the walkway of the sphinxes, where more than 100 on each side of you are facing inward? That's in Egypt, Troy. Now, the weird thing is, well, yeah, that's in Egypt, Troy, and so, what does that have to do with the United States? What does that have to do with the Scottish Rite? That's where it gets kind of fuzzy, but we'll get there from here. The sphinxes themselves are representative of secret wisdom, questions. They used to be gatekeepers, right? Has anybody ever heard that story before? The House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. also has 2 large sphinxes out front. One eye is open, one eye is closed. Okay. And that's going to be something for our Masonic brethren to understand. As you go through these degrees tonight with me, we're going to be discussing not just the backdrops, but more about the historical significance of the scene that's set. Tonight we're discussing the settings of some of the degrees of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, namely those 5 degrees we call obligatory. There are 33 total enumerated degrees. Each has a special lesson or lessons taught. Well, Troy, why couldn't they just do one and get it over with? Right? I've seen Oklahoma. That's a really great story. It went from beginning to end. Well, the Scottish Rite really kind of works in capsules. The degrees of the Scottish Rite are 1-act plays. They're often staged with costume and scenery, thank goodness to our valley. Special effects are also in there. Also, the full riggings of any production. If you don't believe me, so come backstage one day and you can actually see what's behind here. Their purpose is to examine different philosophies, ancient religions, systems of ethics, which we talk about. Through all of these, people have tried to answer certain universal questions. The degrees of the right don't tell a person what he should think. I want you to hear that again. The degrees of the right don't tell someone what they should think about these questions. Instead, they tell them about what great thinkers and civilizations of the past have thought. And they try to create a situation in which the candidate or brother can gain insight, agreeing with Socrates that the unexamined life is not worth living. The right helps with these self-examination questions by providing reference points along the way. Theater, of course, as we all know, is the oldest means of teaching, especially in teaching abstract ideas. If you don't believe me, try and potty train a 3-year-old. It was one of the principal means of instructions in the Middle Ages, as well as in ancient Greece and Rome. Masonry borrows those techniques of theater to make its lessons more impressive and to aid in forming the beginnings of what is hoped to be a lifelong pattern of study. Most of the degrees are set in ancient Israel, because it is from the legend surrounding King Solomon's temple that Masons take many of their parables and lessons. Ancient Egypt, medieval Europe also serve as degree settings, as we'll see later on tonight. While tonight's focus is only on the obligatory degrees and the stage settings, this stage has been set to immerse our candidates, whisking them through cathedrals and catacombs, city ruins, quarries, underground vaults, palace chambers, mausoleums, tabernacles, abbeys, islands, encampments of knights, rivers, chapels, caves, and even through stellar bodies and otherworldly places as well. All of this in hopes that the ScottishRite degrees can give us a sense of historical values and standards. Something we sorely miss today, I believe. It is said that today is the child of yesterday, and no one can understand the significance of the events that are shaking the world unless we see them from the vantage points of history. Out of the crisis of the past, man has discovered principles that are as solid as the mountains and as enduring as the stars. The moral truths that we impart, that prevailed in Jerusalem, that prevailed in Athens, that prevailed in Rome, those moral truths are just as valid, just as imperative in the digital 21st century, if not more so. In his confidence in the reality of these principles, man has built his faith in the permanent value of moral truth. The ScottishRite degrees put a picturesque but explicit language into the civic and social ideas imparted to him in the first 3 degrees. For centuries, Freemasonry has been a tremendous force for enlightenment, for freedom, for social progress in Europe and in the Americas. It was neither impulse nor prejudice that caused the Nazis and fascists to prohibit Freemasonry. It was because they knew that tyranny is threatened wherever a Masonic lodge or temple exists. Scottish Freemasonry is the foe of intolerance, fanaticism, and superstition. We battle every form of racial and sectarian prejudice and bigotry. It is a mighty exponent of freedom in thought, religion, and government. How many of you went to college? How many of you went to college for free? Not getting a scholarship, but for free. And yet, free and public education is what we provide our youth. That is one of the tenets of Freemasonry. I would like to ask the brethren in the audience now, how much have you been charged for what you've been taught in the craft? Not your degrees, not your fees. How much have they charged you? Your tuition. So the tenets of Freemasonry are to educate. And of course, to educate against those foes that I briefly mentioned. Thus, the Scottish Rite is a rite of instruction. It interprets the symbols and allegories of Masonry in the light of history and philosophy, using the words of the supreme prophets of humanity, the ceremonies of great religions of the world, and significant episodes from history to point the moral and adorn our tales. Our first setting is going to be that of the 4th degree, the first that we impart. The fourth degree begins the journey through what we call the Lodge of Perfection. That's a hefty title. The 4th through the 14th degrees are called the Ineffable degrees, because their principal purpose is the investigation and contemplation of the ineffable or unspeakable name of deity. The 4th degree is also called the Secret Master. The first steps our candidates make is into the sanctuary. He is shown duty, reflection, and study. They teach the candidates and ourselves to honor those relationships to God, to family, to country, and to masonry. And the lessons of this degree are secrecy and obedience and fidelity. Those words you probably haven't heard all this week. Depends on who you're Facebook friends with, I guess. When is the last time you heard the word obedience? Unless you have children. Or fidelity. Those words we lose, but are reinvested when we come here. This degree begins as chronologically arranged, originating with King Solomon at a time when the temple was but partially constructed. If you remember in your Bible, as the king of Israel selected 7 of the most worthy expert brethren, what we call master masons, he appointed them special guardians of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Remember that they were walking around in the desert with the tabernacle. This is after that. These guardians of the Sanctum Sanctorum, of the sacred furniture of the most holy place in the temple in Jerusalem, they were called secret masters, and at a time were advanced to higher grades. Those vacancies, of course, created others, and others were selected to fill their vacancies. Only one guard was on duty at a time, yet 7 were elected. Anybody know why? Take a guess. 7 guys, only one on duty at a time. They rotated days. They rotated them out. The allusion to the numeral 7 in this particular degree could be an allusion to many of the numerals that we use for 7. We say the 7 cardinal virtues, or to happiness, the 7 stages in life, the 7 principles of Noah, or to the 7 days of the week, the last having been set apart for the great teachings of this degree. The Hebrew Bible says that the first temple was built in 957 BCE by King Solomon, according to the book of Deuteronomy, as the sole place of Israelite sacrifice. Think about that for a minute. That was the sole place for Israelite sacrifice at the time. That's Deuteronomy 12, 2 through 27. The temple replaced the tabernacle constructed in the Sinai desert under the auspices of Moses, as well as the local sanctuaries and altars in the hills. You see, when the tabernacle was no longer in use, they were also placing small sacrificial altars throughout the hills until this temple was built. The first temple was totally destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. 425, according to historical Jewish sources, but when they sacked the city. It is this temple, King Solomon's temple, to which we refer and to which we will now witness. The Lodge of the Secret Masters meets in that holy place, or Sanctum Sanctorum, or sanctuary of the temple. Notice that there is a gate blocking our way. Could you imagine seeing one building dedicated for all the sacrifices of Christianity in our culture today? They also used hyssop in this temple. Hyssop, if you don't know, has been used for millennia as a holy herb, consecrated for cleaning holy places. The salver and the napkins that they used were for cleansing only. Their bodies were to be washed with pure water, alluding to the cleansing directed under the law. And also present were the 7 branched candlesticks, or candelabra, which were burning in the east. The sanctuary is separated from the Holy of Holies by what's called a balustrade, usually of white marble and heavy hangings of black. We actually put something across the stage for that for our degree, a small work of lattice. The balustrade there is but one door, and the lodge at this time is in mourning, of course, so the furniture is draped in black. The strange thing is, in all of the descriptions of King Solomon's temple, not one description of working tools is read. No working tools of masonry are used in this lodge either, for the work on the temple as at this time has been suspended. King Solomon's temple was Israel's first temple, following the tabernacle for 400 years. Could you imagine seeing the first church erected of your faith? David, although not allowed to build the temple, gave Solomon the architectural designs for the temple. You find that in 1 Chronicles. So could you imagine knowing that a temple must be built, requesting that the temple must be built, and you having the plans in your hands, but being told by God you are not worthy? The cost of the edifice in today's money would be around, take a guess. Throw out a number. 3, 4, 5, between $5 and $6 billion. That's almost a casino, right? Solomon began the construction of the temple 490 years after the people came out of Egypt. The temple was built of great stones, cedar beams, boards overlaid with gold, and the construction took 7 years to complete. The temple itself faced east for obvious reasons, and was built as twice the size of the tabernacle. So what they did is the tabernacle had its own dimensions and proportions, and what they did is they doubled them and made them out of stone instead of out of that fabric. 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, 45 feet high. The bronze altar was also 30 feet by 15 feet high, 30 feet square by 15 feet high. That's the altar that we're talking about inside this edifice. The brazen laver was called a sea for a reason, S-E-A, because it was 15 feet in diameter and 8 feet deep. It also sat on 12 bronze oxen. That is the type of temple we were talking about when we were talking about King Solomon's temple. As Masons, we're walked through King Solomon's temple towards this Holy of Holies, but yet have a gate to stop us. And again, we see the Sphinx is coming down, getting us ready. We're going to, as they change out to the next degree, I kind of want to open this up a little bit to talk to you. Has anybody actually been to Jerusalem? I know, Ed, you've been. Lady Durham, I hope you were there. Has anybody else made the trip over? Okay, when you went there, did you actually get a chance to see where Al-Aqsa's mosque is, where the Dome of the Rocket, where King Solomon's temple was? Right? What did you notice about the landscape?
All stone.
All stone. Did you notice that it was automatically higher up than everything else? Strange. You know, we get upset when they build a Walmart in our own spot. These guys put that temple made of stone, in that place, up that hill. Have you ever thought about what it took to get some of those columns all the way up there? The other idea that I want to impart to you is that those stones that they carried, what they did is they took them out of the quarry, sometimes miles away. They took them out of the quarry, they carved them up roughly, then another guy would sit there and make them exactly the shape to order, and then transport them. But they didn't work on the stones in the temple. Has anybody ever put together a child's swing set? The idea was that when the pieces got there per order, they fit precisely. And to this day, we know, based on historical records, that not even a razor blade could fit between the bricks. The next degree that we impart to the canon is the 14th degree. We're jumping forward in time. We're talking about King Solomon's temple. But of course, all good things must come to an end. And so we found with King Solomon's temple. The 14th degree is called the perfect Elu, which is a strange word. They also call it the grand elect, or the perfect and sublime mason. Do you guys feel sublime ever? Do you ever think of yourself as feeling sublime today? That's what's imparted in the 14th degree. The next degree on our travels takes us through the completion of the construction of the Holy Temple. Remember I told you that it was on hold for just a little bit? Well, they completed it, of course. We read about that in our Bible. The construction of the Holy Temple is completed and then, of course, destroyed. The 14th degree narrates this destruction of both it and the city of Jerusalem, along with the death of Solomon. Anybody read Lamentations before? Have you ever read through Lamentations or know why it's called that? The word Lamentations, of course, to lament. What you read is about a prophet up on a hill overlooking the city that he loves, and the destruction of the temple and the city being so severe that he can no longer cry tears. They don't come out anymore. I don't know if you've had heartache in your life or if you've had troubles. Have you ever cried so much that you couldn't cry anymore? Of course, he was crying because there were women that were sacrificing their children in the streets so they wouldn't have to go hungry. There were children that were starving. There were men, of course, doing what horrible men do. So Lamentations teaches us a little bit about this destruction of Jerusalem. And we talk about that destruction and almost a resurrection in this 14th degree. What we found is that this degree is set in a secret vault. The vault is directly under the Sanctum Sanctorum. The 14th degree we call the perfect Elu, grand elect, the perfect and sublime mason. The word perfect is here not to denote perfection. I'm going to say that again because it threw me for a loop the first time I read it. The word perfect here is not to denote perfection, but rather the antiquated use of the word to mean complete. Complete. The word Elu may sound foreign to you. Elu, E-L-U, and it should, because it is. It's a French word. Elu, meaning the one who is selected or elected. In Latin, it's thought to be a form of ele, meaning he that is. We now descend into that vault. King Solomon, according to our story, you guys are still with me, right? King Solomon, the temple was destroyed. Okay. According to our story, was dedicating the completion of the temple. At the dedication of the building, Solomon offered 220 oxen, 120,000 sheep, and it was a 14-day feast. Have you ever thrown a party for 14 days? Not even close. It's a trek to try and feed kids at the end of the night. So the idea is that these people, these Israelites, were celebrating the completion of the temple for 14 days. The temple that's on top of this area was built by 30,000 Israelites. And you'd think that'd be enough. But you add to that 150,000 Canaanites, Phoenicians, and artists and craftsmen from Tyre. So together, we're talking more than 180 to 190,000 people that are celebrating this completion. We know that King Solomon's heart fell away from the true and ever-living God, and that God sent Nebuchadnezzar to sack the temple and destroy the city. After the city was taken, the king's palace and the temple were demolished. This sacred vault, along with the treasures it contained, still stood, safe and underground. The perfect Elu repaired to this vault at night and excavated. There's a song sung during this degree in some jurisdictions. The lyrics go like this. This precious treasure, long concealed, was by 3 worthy knights revealed. Where erst a temple stood, its ancient ruins they explored, and found the grand mysterious word, made known before the flood. Have any of you heard that song sung for this degree? Again, finding this was unique for me. This is also, again, the 14th degree, which concludes the Lodge of Perfection, which we started back at the 4th. This encapsulates, I've encapped the Lodge of Perfection for you, starting with the 4th, and then ending with the completion of the temple, and then finding something special underground in the vault when it was excavated. The 14th degree also has something peculiar in terms of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. This is the degree in which the Scottish Rite Mason normally receives a ring. This ring is the ring of the perfect healing, which is awarded to every Scottish Rite Freemason who attains the 14th degree if he so chooses. It is one of the oldest Masonic accoutrements. And I've seen some of your lapel pins. In the earliest existing 14th degree ritual of the Rite of Perfection, found in the Franken manuscript in 1783, the ring is described as a plain band of gold with this inscription: Virtus Junxus Mors non separabat, which is Latin for what virtue has united, death cannot separate. At some point in the late 19th century, the Supreme Council for the Northern Jurisdiction altered the ring to add the equilateral triangle with the Hebrew letter Yod in the middle. And the Southern Jurisdiction later adopted this design as well, and that is the current ring that is used today. The ring of the 14th is very unique because it's one of the things that Scottish Rite Masons can hand down, but only to another Scottish Rite Mason. It's not something for them to give to their oldest son for him to wear around. That ring is unique. The equilateral triangle with the Hebrew letter in the center of it is something that is also unique to the Scottish Rite fraternity. If you pull the main curtain, please. Main curtain. There we go. The next degree I'm going to take you through, and again, we've gone through King Solomon, we've talked about the temple, we've talked about the vault underneath there. All of these are roughly 400 years after Moses, 400 or 500 years. We're going to now jump in our time machines and travel forward. We're going to the 18th degree now. We've skipped over the 15th, 16th, 17th. We're to the 18th now, and it's called the Chapter of Rose Croix. This chapter of Rose Croix is very unique. As a matter of fact, in the UK, that's what they call the Scottish Rite. It's just Rose Croix. The degrees of the Chapter of Rose Croix, or the Rosy Cross, are very complex, as you know. They attempt to invest a candidate with deeper understandings of religion and philosophy, ethics and history. Good things for mixed company, right? The intellectual challenges presented in these degrees is at times overwhelming, even to the learned candidate as you walk through these degrees, as you read about them. It's almost like a never-ending well from which you never hear the coin clink. This degree can also take years to master the true understanding. Known as the Knight Rose Croix, or the Knight of the Rose Croix of Herodin, or Sovereign Prince Rose Croix of the Knight of the Pelican and Eagle. And again, in the UK, all candidates for membership must profess the Trinitarian Christian faith and have been Master Masons for at least 1 year to actually receive this degree. The Rosy Cross, the one we see in the center of our drop here, has several meanings, depending upon the source. Some groups, such as the ancient and mystical order of the Rosicrucis, from a non-sectarian or non-religious view, suggest that the Rosy Cross predates Christianity itself. And you can see one up in the ceiling there. They say the cross represents the human body, and the rose represents the individual's unfolding consciousness. The Rosicrucian Fellowship and the kindred groups of Rosicrucianists, ones who believe in the Rosy Cross, promulgated an esoteric Christian viewpoint that says that the Rosicrucian Brotherhood was founded in the early 14th century, or between the 13th and the 14th centuries, as an invisible college of mystic sages. That invisible college of mystic sages then could be one side of this coin, where it's just an esoteric belief, it's just a symbol with a rose on it to describe your body and your enlightenment, or it could mean something a little bit deeper. Main curtain, please. Main curtain. There we go. When we think of the rosy cross, sometimes this is what's also depicted. This scene you're seeing now is from the 18th degree, the Knight of the Rose Croix. Although there are other scenes that are set for this degree, I thought this one would be most impactful for tonight. The symbol for the cross itself, especially this one, has been historically recorded time and time again throughout history. From the 7th century, Byzantine, what they call solitas. It was a coin that shows Leontius, I have to pronounce that correctly, Leontius holding what they call a globus cruciger. A globus cruciger was one of you've probably seen them, especially at Easter time. A globus cruciger was a round globe with a cross on the top, and it normally is like a censer. The coin had the globus cruciger on one side and what they call a three-stepped cross on the obverse. This is in the 7th century in the Byzantine era. To the Latin or Roman cross, or the patriarchal cross, or the three-bar cross, or the Tau row cross, or the Jerusalem or Crusaders cross, which is the large cross with the smaller cross in each of the corners. You've probably seen that one before too. Used to represent the kingdom of Jerusalem. There's also the cross of St. Peter, which is hung upside down, and what they call the saltire, or crux decusada. The crux decusada is also known as the St. Andrew's cross for our brethren in the audience that are members of the Knights of St. Andrew, which is in the form of an X. The 18th degree of the Knight of Rose Croix, the Rosy Cross, teaches us that life and its strengths come from God. The rose may signify the dawn, and the cross, or crux ansata, is represented on the oldest monuments of mankind in the form of the Ankh, or the Tau cross. You've probably seen one of those before. The Tau cross is like a T with a circle on the top. This symbol was the hieroglyphic for life, or life-giving. Therefore, we can interpret this as life that emanated from deity, and that of eternal life for which we all hope. It also may teach us to be tolerant of others. If you need assistance with that, let me know. Tolerance is also a word that we forget and are reinvested here. It also teaches us to be tolerant of others' faults, with the solemn task not to be better than each other, but to be better than ourselves. The symbol of the cross, in this degree, is not just the cross with the rose. Of course, we all know this scene. When I was researching this degree, I came across, no pun intended, more than 4,000 iterations of that symbol. Everything from non-believers to guys that were using it in their architecture for certain reasons, like for instance the St. Andrew's cross. The cross itself is an ancient symbol, but we, the Scottish Rite Masons, always recognize it with the rose in the center. Main curtain. You guys with me so far? I know it's been a long. That pork loin looked delicious. How was it? Was it okay? Was it all right? So we've gone through so far. We've talked about King Solomon. We've talked about Jerusalem. We've talked about the reconstruction of the temple, and then knocking it down again like Lego bricks. We talked about going underneath in the secret vault. Then we fast forwarded to this time of the Christ. Understand that Solomon and the time of the Christ, they're different, but at the same time, the 18th degree doesn't really highlight just that. It's a deeper significance. We talk about the rosy cross, something that may actually have preceded that symbol. The next degree, who's keeping track? We only have 2 left. The next degree is in what we call the Council of Kadash. The degree of the Council of Kadash is comprising of the 19th through the 30th degrees. They're what we call chivalric degrees. The chivalric degrees, of course, are the knightly degrees. They're philosophical, but they also contain a mystical material. At this point in the Scottish Freemasons' education, if you will, we have broken through what is the material world. We have changed over from your politics to your religion to your maybe intangible life. Spirituality is one of those things we discuss in these degrees. We've changed from tangible ideas and customs to a world filled with spirituality and symbol. The word Kadash, of course, is a Hebrew word meaning holy or consecrated. And the complexity of these degrees cannot be overstated, as it is exemplified by the number of pages attributed to them in Morals and Dogma, written by one of our most valued members, Albert Pike. The 28th degree alone is over a quarter of the 1,000-page work. Okay? We now prepare to view a scene that is linked to the Council of Emperors of the East and West. From the earliest portrayal of this degree, from 1758, this council united several Masonic degrees being conducted in the 18th century France. The Knight Kadash, or originally, the illustrious and grand commander of the White and Black Eagle, Grand Elect Kadash. We always stretch things out, right? Was part of a full complement of 25 degrees or grades, governed by this council. The degrees, 19th through 29, make up what's known as the degrees of Areopagus, which is derived from the court in ancient Athens of the same name. The Knight Kadash was the 24th degree of this complement, but for our form, it takes place as the 30th and last degree in this group, the Council of Kadash. This degree, along with the 2 others, were originally called the Templar degrees, as the candidate is taught that he should apply himself practically as a defender of the temple of the Most High God. And while he's to be armed with steel on the outside, he is to be armed with faith and love on the inside. The lessons of this degree are to be true to ourselves, to stand for what is right and just in our lives today, to believe in God, our country, and ourselves. In this degree, we witness a mausoleum. In this degree, the characters that sit on the stage are dressed with a wide-brimmed hat with black felt, and they have a plume of red ostrich feathers off the left-hand side, or right, depending upon how you wear yours. Think the 3 Musketeers. They all have swords, and their uniforms bear the letters J.B.M. These 3 letters refer to one of our greatest exemplars, Jacques de Molay. And while I've been sort of comical with you about certain degrees, this one definitely hits my heart directly. We begin to speak of the great and glorious exploits of the Knights Templar here. In this degree, we talk about the rise and progress of the Knights Templar, their great numbers, their wealth, their high standing in every kingdom in Europe, in their persecution and their fall, their sufferings, and their sufferings of their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, and his brave knights, by order of Pope Clement V. The cruelty and barbarity of Philip the Fair. By the way, when they called him Philip the Fair, it's not because he judged righteously, it's because he was fair. And we also discussed the potentates and governments in Europe that did nothing to stop it. Jacques de Molay was born in France in 1243 and was the 23rd and last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, leading the order until 1292, when it was dissolved. King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the Templars, had de Molay and many other French Templars arrested in 1307, and of course what we know is Friday the 13th. They were tortured into making false confessions. When de Molay later retracted his confession, Philip had him burned upon a scaffold on an island in the River Seine, in front of Notre Dame de Paris. That's in March of 1314. King Philip IV of France was in favor of merging the orders of all of the knights under his own command, thereby making himself what they call Rex Bellator, or the War King. De Molay, however, rejected the idea. Philip was already at odds with the papacy, trying to tax the clergy. Not a new idea, even today. And they'd been attempting to assert his own authority, this is King Philip again, his own authority is higher than that of the Pope at the time. After de Molay's arrest and 7 long years of torture, Jacques de Molay ended the daily pain of torture. The cardinals agreed upon the death sentence for him. According to the eyewitnesses of the execution, de Molay showed no sign of fear, and he tried to not show pain during his slow death on the burning stake. You see, when most of the pyres were prepared in such a way that day, and back at that time, they were prepared in such a way that the victims would die quickly and burn asunder. They would stack them this way. But it was not to be so with Jacques de Molay. In his case, they prepared a pyre which would burn slowly. And before he died, he made his voice heard loudly once more. The results of the speech may have led the king and the cardinals to regret not allowing him to die within a few minutes, like the other knights. You see, while burning on the pyre, de Molay cursed King Philip IV of France, and his descendants, and Pope Clement V, and everyone else who supported his death. You see, de Molay said that within a year and a day, Clement V and Philip IV would die. He also said Philip's bloodline would reign in France no more. And it happened as de Molay wished for. Death came for Clement I. He lost a battle with a damaging disease on April 20th in 1314. Shortly after that, the Pope and Philip died of a stroke while hunting. A tragic death was also the destiny for all of Philip's successors. Between 1314 and 1328, all 3 sons and grandsons of the French king died. Within 14 years from the death of de Molay, the House of the Caped no longer existed, after it had stood for 300 years. Today, when you hear the word de Molay, we refer to it as the premier youth leadership organization in Freemasonry, building young men of character, dedicated to making young men better and leaders of our country, providing a program that bases itself on timeless principles, practical experience. The de Molay program of today strives not only to create the extraordinary leader, but also a leader of character. Anyone can have charisma. Look at our current political climate today. De Molays hold themselves to a higher moral standard, striving to consistently improve and be better each and every day. And that is the namesake in this degree for Jacques de Molay. We have but one final degree. This degree will be held in the consistory. And as they set the scene, I want you to think for a moment the degrees that we haven't discussed tonight. I want you to think for a moment about the things that maybe I assume you know, or you assume that you've read about. The Knights Templar, for instance. the hooked decks, or whether or not these rooms really knew that they were in Virginia at the time, making moonshine. Oak Island and all these great YouTube flicks. I want you to think about the Knights Templar that you've heard about and read about. Find out what they stood for, because the symbol of the men are more important than finding out whether or not you actually belong to them. Tonight, the last degree that we're going to discuss is what we call the 32nd degree. In this degree, we've come full circle. We began at the Temple of King Solomon in Jerusalem. We traveled to the vault under that temple. We then went to the solemn hills of Calvary to see one of the best examples to mankind. We then sped forward in time to the French foundings of the Knights Templar, where we met another martyr who stood for his discipline and his faith. We now come to the encampment of all of the masters, the secretaries, the provosts, the judges, the intendants, the elims, the master architects, the knights of the east and west, the princes of Jerusalem, the knights Rose Croix. We extend even further into the knighthood of the chiefs of the tabernacle, the princes of mercy, the Scottish Knights of St. Andrew, from which my current regalia emanates. We continue deeper into the Knights of Kadash, or the Holy, then to the Inspector's Inquisitor, and lastly to this degree. This degree is held in what we deem the consistory. The consistory degrees are very different from all the preceding degrees. They attempt to illustrate the creation of the ideal balance between the spiritual and the temporal. So at first we talked about buildings of tabernacles from stone, and then we talked about buildings on faith. Then we talked about spiritual ideas and the in concrete. And now we talk about the balance of both. In the 32nd degree, the master of the royal secret, the lessons of this degree are that genuine brotherhood requires mutual regard, opinion, esteem, and charity. That we should always look for the good in all things. That make allowances for other shortcomings. And that we trust the Supreme Architect to lead us to friendship, morality, and brotherly love. Have you ever heard the axiom, if you worry, don't pray. And if you pray, don't worry. No other degree embodies that mindset than the 32nd. Many of you who see this, the plethora of symbols and letters, the figures, the tense, the shapes and structures, I can attest to you that this actually is decipherable to those of us who've gone through the degree. You don't have to be Kenny Fuller to know what these mean. These degrees remind us that, like the science of the ancients, the royal secret that we impart in this degree is concealed even here. We teach that faith begins where reason sinks exhausted. And how true can that be for a week like this? I'm going to leave you for a few moments to examine this curtain in silence, with a great last thought before I come back, borrowed from our service of remembrance for our fallen brethren. The line goes like this, and many of you know it well. May the peace of our Master be with you, and remain with you always. It is always better to love than to hate. Remember, our duty is not to be better than others, but to be better than ourselves. And the more that we have, the more we owe to those around us who are in need. So, the last degree, the 32nd degree, the culmination of the Scottish Rite, the master of the royal secret, is concentric circles of us all. It teaches us that we all have our own roles to play, our own tents to inhabit, our own letters to fly, and our own standards to bear. And yet we are all inside the same encampment. How odd it is that we forget it daily. How odd it is that we have multiple flags on this background. We know what they mean. We know what they stand for. We know that they're symbolic. But we forget that we all bear this one. How odd it is that we forget we're all in the same encampment. And so this degree, in summa, for the Scottish Rite Mason, completes his journey through the Scottish Rite instruction to the 32nd degree, the Master of the Royal Secret. Not only do you realize that all things are encompassing, but that balance is necessary for it to work. Everyone should know their role, so to speak. And how quickly we forget that. The 32nd degree, along with the rest, and again, understand that the 32nd is a culmination of all of the degrees. The 4th through the 32nd is a reminder to always, always remember to look back before you look forward. So too we have the double-headed eagle, the knight of the east and west, looking both directions. So too we have the Scottish Rite, which is not necessarily as Scottish as we think, but an institute of instruction, an institution of instruction, dedicated and designed to teach brethren that we all encamp together. I hope tonight I've been worthy of your time. I thank you very much for attending tonight and giving me a few moments up here on the stage to walk you through some of these degrees. I hope you have learned just some of the small nuggets that I've gained and gleaned from this experience. I thank you very much.
Well, I would first like to again thank Troy. I know he's put a lot of time and effort into this. I think it's shown in what we've done. Guys, you can take the main curtain back down. Or not. As you see, you've got just a small glimpse of the degrees and some of the beauty that we go through in these degrees, particularly for those of you who are not Scottish Rite Masons, and for those of you that are, and just refreshing your memory on that. A little bit of information about it. These backdrops, I think there's a total of 94 of them, Gary. And other than the main drop, are all original, correct? Which puts them next year at 100 years old. Okay, you can see how detailed, and how many of you thought had to look twice at the marble scene, the very first scene that Troy showed us, and look at it and think, that's a painting? The items and the lessons that we teach in here, by the use of some of these tools, are somewhat in danger as well. It takes an awful lot to maintain, to upkeep, and to make sure that we continue to have these tools and this luxury for our valley. We're constantly repairing, touching up, not only the screens, that are just the most vivid illustration of that, but also the building itself. I know that all of us sit there and we get letters and notes asking for money and those type of things, and we say, another one. Really? But if we want to continue to work and to be able to teach these in such great detail and such a vivid form, please consider that when those do come to your door. Again, I would like to thank Troy for putting this all together. He did an excellent job. Let's have another round of applause for him. thank Brother Ed Durham for putting this idea out there. He was the one that sparked this back late last year, and it's been quite a while to get here, so thank you, Ed, for putting this thought in our head. And lastly, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, particularly our guests, and those of you who it's maybe your first or maybe your second time to the ScottishRite building. We really enjoyed having you here tonight, and we look forward to you coming back. Keep an eye on our websites, our Facebook pages, and everything else for when our next open meetings are. We'd love to have you back. So with that, I'll ask Brother Al Sims to please dismiss us with prayer.
Our dear most gracious Heavenly Father, again we come to you just thanking you, Lord, for all the many blessings that you've bestowed upon us. Thank you for the fellowship, the friendship that we've enjoyed tonight. Thank you for the knowledge that we've gained. We just ask you to be with us this evening as we return to our homes. Help us to be able to carry this information, to be able to serve you. In great Master's name. Amen.
So motivated. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Good job, man. Thank you, sir. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you.
That was great, man. Troy. Absolutely.